Hi everyone. For my project, I'm analyzing Jordan Peele's Get Out and exploring how the film exposes modern forms of racism through horror and symbolism and everyday interactions. I'm using an ethnic study lens to break down three major concepts, which are racial formation, microaggressions as racial uh, projects, and the commodification of black bodies. Get Out came out in 2017, which was actually right after a period when people were insisting that America was no longer racist. But the film argues that racism did not disappear, it just evolved. So I'm going to walk through how the movie shows these ideas in action and why it matters. So, just for some background context, Jordan Peele has said that Get Out is a documentary disguised as a horror film. He wanted to reveal the type of racism that hides behind politeness, progressiveness, and liberal identity. This is important in ethnic studies because we're not just examining individual prejudice, we're also looking at systems, histories, and racial meanings that society continues to reproduce. So, for the first concept, racial formation, from Omi and Winnett, is the idea that race is socially created and it changes depending on politics, culture, media, and power. A racial project is anything that shapes how we understand race, whether it's a law, a stereotype, or even a casual comment. In Get Out, the Armitage family performs a certain racial identity. The good liberal white family, and Dean brags that he would have voted for Obama a third time, and Rose acts overly supportive, and they're not like other white people. These moments aren't just very awkward, they're racially motivated. So they shape race by reinforcing the idea that racism is only something bad conservatives do. Peele, he is calling out how this liberal wokeness masks deeper power struggles. Deeper like power structures. So there's a scene, the garden party, that gives one of the clearest examples. Every guest treats Chris like an exhibit. They're comparing him to Tiger Woods. They're commenting on his physique and asking inappropriate questions about blackness. So what's happening here is a racial project based on the stereotype of the black male body as athletic, sexual, and physically superior. And doing this erases Chris's humanity. The guests aren't seeing him as a person. They're constructing a version of blackness that exists to their benefit. So Get Out uses these awkward social moments to show how everyday racial formation works, even among people who claim to be not racist. The second concept is microaggressions as racial projects. Microaggressions are small, everyday comments or actions that communicate bias. But in ethnic studies, we also see them as mini racial projects. They create and reinforce racial meaning. So, Jordan Peele turns microaggressions into horror. So, one scene, the police scene where they get pulled over, Rose defends Chris, but really it's a way to keep him unrecorded for her plan. It looks like anti-racist allyship, but it's a manipulation of the system. And then for Dean's house tour, I think it was like black is in fashion. This line is a racial microaggression that turns black identity into a trend. And then the party guests were touching Chris and inspecting him. These interactions reinforce the idea that black bodies exist to be evaluated. Peele shows how microaggressions pile up to become dangerous, and it's not just awkwardness, it's the entire horror of the film. Jordan Peele uses microaggressions to reveal how racism is reproduced casually, and not just through slurs or violence, but through everyday little interactions that normalize racial hierarchy. Third concept is commodification of black bodies. This is one of the strongest ethnic study themes in the film, I think. Commodification means treating a group of bodies, culture, or labor as objects to be bought, used, or consumed. In Get Out, the Armitage family literally treats black bodies as merchandise. So there's a scene, the silent auction scene. The guests bid on Chris the same way enslaved people were auctioned. Peele references this directly. The paddles, there's like the little silent gestures and positioning Chris. The next scene is the Kawaluga procedure. This is a modern retelling of the afterlife of slavery. The white characters want black bodies for strength, eyesight, youth, coolness, physical traits. They want the body without the black person. This is racial commodification. Very literal. The next scene is Rose browsing photos of her previous victims. She collects black men like trophies. This is disturbing. This is a disturbing parallel to historical patterns of white desire mixed with domination. So the film argues that even in supposedly progressive spaces, black people are still valued mainly for what their bodies can offer to whiteness. So using racial formation, microaggressions, and commodification, Get Out exposes a version of racism that's polite, performative, and embedded in everyday life. The film fits directly into goals of ethnic studies because it challenges the myth of a post-racial America and shows how deeply racial meaning continues to structure relationships and institutions. Peele doesn't just create horror, he reveals the horror that already exists with racial dynamics in real world that we probably all participate in some way.